Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation with Jason Barrett, IC, OSINT, Executive OD&I. Before we begin the program, first a message from our sponsor.
Global security continues to grow in complexity, hiding dangers your organization must contain. To combat these complex threats, you need trusted intelligence quickly. With 77 million data points and growing, verified by a global team of specialist expert analysts with international military experience. Our assured open source foundational military intelligence is accessible within your existing system and fully interconnected through our unique solution, Intara, supplying your organization the power to dive in and rapidly retrieve all vital intelligence through any pathway, and the ability to fuse and enrich other data sources enables a single intelligence environment, giving you faster access to quality data for mission users, securing assets, and supporting your strategic decisions. Janes, the OSINT agency.
Now, please welcome Executive Vice President John Doyon.
Good morning and welcome to our program. This morning, we're pleased to host one of our community's top leaders for the final in our three-part series on the future of OSINT, sponsored by Janes. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them through the questions box on the right side of your screen. We have over 600 registrants for today's program, so I'll try my best to get to all the questions possible. Also, we're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call. This is a reminder that the program is on the record and it's being recorded. And finally, I'd like to thank our host sponsor, Janes, for their support of this program. We could not deliver this kind of thought leadership without the support of our sponsor partners. And here to introduce our speaker is Jessica Hersey, Vice President, Business Development at Janes. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you, INSA, for holding this morning's discussion. For decades, Janes has supported the U.S. intelligence community, including OD&I, with trusted foundational intelligence. Our interconnected foundational military data with over 115 million assured connections linking military platforms, subsystems, installations, units, orbats, and manufacturers, our global team of over 250 analysts and subject matter experts, and our OSINT tradecraft honed for decades to deliver data analysis that you can trust, combined to deliver the intelligence analysts need for mission critical decisions. We're pleased to have sponsored INSA's Coffee and Conversation series, working with them to showcase industry experts who add so much context to national security issues. Our guest today is Mr. Jason Barrett, OD&I's first OSINT executive, a position he's held since October. He manages the enterprise-wide synchronization and coordination of the intelligence community's OSINT mission, develops OSINT resource and investment plans, and establishes IC policies and standards. In this role, Mr. Barrett oversees the IC-wide implementation of the recently released policy framework on commercially available information, and we'll hear from him today on that very topic. Mr. Barrett has extensive IC experience as an all-source analyst, advisor and leader at multiple government agencies. He has been Deputy Director of OD&I Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center, Chief of the FBI's Asia Cyber Intelligence Unit, Executive Assistant to the Director of National Intelligence, and President's Daily Briefer to the National Security and Homeland Security Advisors. Today, Mr. Barrett will share OD&I's perspective on OSINT's increasing importance in intelligence gathering and analysis. In addition, he'll cover AI and other emerging technologies as they relate to OSINT, interagency coordination, and data sharing, and the intelligence community's desires and efforts to work closely with industry and academia in advancing OSINT disciplines and tradecraft. I'm really excited to hear his talk. So welcome to INSA's Coffee and Conversation, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Jessica. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
And I'll thank you as well, Jessica, and good morning, Jason. Thank you for joining us. And we've got a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get right into it. Our first question, you bring a lot of experience, a wealth of experience from your time in the intelligence and national security communities to this job. How have these experiences helped shape your perspective about the future of open source intelligence and analytic tradecraft?
First, thanks, John, for the invitation and for the introduction. This is a great opportunity for not just me, but for the OSINT community. And I will be the first one to tell you how blessed I feel to have had the experiences I've had over the last 20 years. But I think if you were going to look through those experiences for a through line, whether it's writing PDBs as an analyst, serving on joint terrorism task forces, or being a PDB briefer and an exec for the DNI, one of the things that really comes to mind is I have a really refined appreciation for information that's truly meaningful to a decision maker and an intense interest in finding ways to deliver it in as effective a way as possible. And so whether that's spending 6 days a week with the National Security Advisor, briefing her on the most important and sensitive intelligence issues that we have, or whether that's spending every day with the DNI. I've seen quite a bit of sensitive information, and frankly, it's covered the full gamut of potential topics. But one thing that is I think clear through those experiences is they don't really care where the information is coming from, and neither should we. What we should care from, as far as how it's collected, what we should care about is it accurate? Is it going to help inform and affect decision making in a positive way? And can we deliver it in a timely manner that allows for those decisions to be made? And so, I'm less impressed by information that's classified at this point than I am by information that's truly valuable. I think I've seen through a variety of experiences how that theme has really played out. When it comes to how that affects open source intelligence and my views on that, I really think we're at an inflection point for the IC. If you look back over the last 60 years, almost every decade, there's been someone prominent within the IC, whether it's a DCI back 40 years ago, whether it's a longtime Russia analyst, or whether it's someone in between. Undoubtedly, you will be able to find in the archives someone who has said open source serves as the primary source for most of our insights. The challenge has been, over the last 20 years in particular, the nature of our business has evolved quite a bit with the CT fight. And I think, frankly, as that has changed, I wouldn't say the threat is less. Certainly we've done a lot to deter and thwart that threat, but at the same time, the information environment has radically evolved. And so whether that's commercial data and the explosion there, or whether it's just the value of publicly available information with social media increasing, we've seen, I think, a tremendous opportunity here to change how the IC does its business. And open source intelligence is going to be a key factor in that.
Cool. Yeah, last year, INSA released a video to help explain the power and the scope and the potential of open source intelligence. And there's just continual discussion around it. We have, again, over 600 people registered today. I think that, folks want to know how you can leverage OSINT to improve the overall information you give to policymakers and customers, blending it, merging it with other sources. How do you think analysts throughout the IC can use OSINT to best harness its potential and understand its capabilities?
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where we have to do two things. One, we have to better integrate it into the all source community, for sure. That's been an evergreen issue that has been discussed for years, and we're certainly focused on that. But I think equally important in the discussion is the professionalization of the OSINT discipline itself and the aligning of resources to match that. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be Congress is going to give us a huge increase in funding, although that would be nice. But I think we also have to have a real conversation about the return on investment that OSINT offers, and that may mean realigning resources within the IC. Obviously that gets into more sensitive discussions that I don't need to necessarily go into here, but I think that's a real conversation worth having. I think when we think about how open source intelligence is really going to shape our analysis in our information space, we've got to mature the analytic tradecraft and the analytic production within the OSINT community, not just the collection of open source intelligence, but the actual assessment of open source intelligence. And we need to do it on the unclassified fabrics so that we're not creating inefficiencies, which we have for years, which is we collect or acquire the information in an open source arena, then we move it to the high side fabrics, we analyze it, and then there's a lag time before we can ever get it back down through a downgrading process because it's been collated with other types of information. I think we can do a lot better than that, particularly in helping inform decision-making at the policymaker side, driving intel diplomacy, and supporting our warfighter.
Yeah. Hey, earlier this year, the IC's open source intelligence strategy for 2024 to 26 was issued. Can you tell us a little bit more about that strategy and some of its key findings and goals? And were some of these issues like professionalization, resources, tradecraft, were those covered in the strategy and addressed?
Yeah, so there was 4 key pillars in that strategy that ODNI and CIA put out jointly, and that they really covered the coordination of open source information and how we acquire it, so data acquisition and expanded sharing, establishing an integrated open source collection management process, driving OSINT innovation, and developing our workforce through improved tradecraft efforts. Those are the big pillars, right? Those are the strategic efforts. Within the OSINT strategy was also the IC's first OSINT definition in 20 years. We had used a really outdated one in my opinion, and one that needed to be refined. And for those who saw it, they might notice an important change that is much more relevant to modern times, and that's the addition of commercially available information. So the OSINT definition now says that OSINT is information derived exclusively from publicly and commercially available information. That's an important, I think, change for not just the OSINT community, but for the IC. And when you think about the release of the commercially available information framework that ODNI released 2 months ago, and then you think about the evolution in technology and how we're bringing on board within the OSINT community certain capabilities. And then you think about the explosion of data that is available to us from a publicly and commercially available perspective. We've got a huge opportunity in the unclassified space to save the government money from a data storage perspective, to think in a transformative way about how we leverage that data, and to drive our capabilities for the government and informing policymakers and driving intel efforts in a much more accelerated way in an unclassified environment. That gives us the opportunity to have a much more distributed workforce. It gives us the ability to leverage and partner with industry and the brilliant minds that are innovating in that space every single day. And it gives us the opportunity to do it. It's going to cost some money, but it's not going to be, if done well, it doesn't need to be near as expensive as maybe some of the other disciplines are.
Yeah, this sounds like some major changes, perhaps, in the way you're thinking about obtaining and analyzing OSINT data for the IC. How do some of these things you've talked about, Jason, what do you think about how you might implement some of those, or provide with the different IC components with sort of a roadmap to implementing some of these changes so that everyone's benefiting from these efforts?
Yeah, so first, like I said, we need to professionalize the discipline in a way that allows for not just the collection of the information, but the dissemination and assessing, analyzing, and production of that information into products that are really informing decision makers. I think too often over the last 20 years, what the OSINT community has been used for is bulk translations of really important global media sources. And we've done that really, really well, but it has gone to others within the IC, and we've received very little value add back from them. And so what you end up getting is, as a taxpayer, not a great return on investment, and a huge amount of storage costs. And at the same time, the same people who are doing a lot of this work are innovating in incredible ways when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence and translation capabilities. And it ends up going into the ether without being credibly used in really important ways that are driving decision making, at least on a reoccurring basis. And I think we certainly need to continue to support horizontally our IC colleagues. I would like to see, however, us do a much more aggressive job and, frankly, a fully developed job of supporting our policymakers through unclassified assessments. What does that look like? Well, there's going to need to be standardized, there's going to need to be common standards that are employed across the IC when it comes to our collection and analysis of open source intelligence. That is already something that we're working on. Within ODNI right now, we are starting the process. We started last month, the process of updating our intelligence community standard for open source intelligence. And that will help update how the IC cites open source information in their products. And it will also help provide the pathway for open source production of not just individual reports or individual reporting, but actual assessments. I think if you look at other ways that we're implementing what I was talking about earlier, we need to transform how we obtain, use, and manage CAI. We need to keep it where it's at, not bring it in bulk. We need to lay the foundation for an OSINT enterprise that sits shoulder to shoulder with industry and leverages their platforms and their data on a day-to-day basis, so that we're leveraging the best that America and our allies have to offer. And then we need to serve as a test bed for capabilities in this space, so that the rest of the IC, as they need to go through really important security protocols, can see how certain capabilities might work and can partner with us in that process.
Hey, you mentioned working on standards for collection and analysis, some of the work you're doing currently. Does that include, there's a lot of talk about, how you deal with misinformation and disinformation that's out on the internet, out there, publicly available information. Does that include addressing, how you stand up some guardrails or ways to identify misinformation, disinformation? Where are you on that issue?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, frankly, the open source community does really well is it triages and analyzes the information it's collecting. Our collectors are some of the best there are. The problem is they just haven't gotten a lot of attention, and a lot of their collection has not been leveraged in the unclassified arena. But when they are collecting it, we're not just going to, the well-known and established websites, right? That everybody's going to go. It's not just about going to Google or the Times or the Journal or or anything else like that. We are employing a very sophisticated tradecraft that leverages a variety of different capabilities to go into surface layers, think national news, but we also want to use subscription-based services, and we want to go into the deep web and the dark web and to leverage industry partners' capabilities in that space. And we're using certain kinds of capabilities to ensure that we're not running around like a bull in the china shop. But all of that to say, the mis and disinformation space is one that is that has been rapidly evolving over the last 8 years, and one that I know my partners at ODNI, at FMIC, and then elsewhere in the government have been keenly focused on. When it comes to how the OSINT community is looking at it, we're looking at it from a tradecraft perspective and making sure that as we disseminate information and put together unclassified analysis, we are carefully assessing the credibility of the information. We're employing, analytic tradecraft that everybody would appreciate, and we're leveraging, frankly, some of the innovative approaches that industry partners are taking in this space, to improve our own understanding. I think I would also say we have to be very careful that we're focused on the foreign adversary aspect of this and not anything else that might touch First Amendment issues. And so I think for me, it's really important, in looking at the OSINT community in particular, that we are focused on understanding where the information is coming from or the intent behind it, rather than maybe how others might use it, whether it's wittingly or unwittingly.
Okay, I'm gonna ask 2 more questions, and then we get a lot of great audience questions in here, so I'll switch over those soon. But the next question, let's talk a little about emerging tools and technologies. What do you see out there that excites you, that might help shape the future of OSINT, some new innovations, perhaps, that are going to impact the collection and analysis of open source information?
I mean, I think anybody who started this discussion in this space without talking about how generative AI is going to affect us probably, would be missing something. For us, this has been a huge development. We are serving as a leading edge for the IC in employing this capability, and a great. I have a lot of praise for how my partners at CIA have really rolled that in over the last year. I think we've got a ways to go when it comes to how we truly incorporate our workflow with it. But I'm extremely excited about not just how it might be used there, but how we're going to provide access to others, not just in our community, but elsewhere outside of the Title 50 group. I think we also have a huge opportunity potentially to pair it with other platforms in the unclassified space that other IC agencies are developing, and truly make it multimodal and functional. And I'm excited about how we're going to also pair it with large amounts of commercially available information. There's a huge opportunity here, and I think that the technology is going to allow us to innovate within the OSINT space faster than anywhere else. And if we think thoughtfully about how we acquire this information, and we focus on accessing it where it's at rather than bringing it in bulk, and then we think about what that looks like from an acquisition perspective, I think what I'm excited about is we can do a lot of this work with partners in the nonprofit and industry space that allow us to better protect privacy while getting us the information we need and keeping storage costs low within the IC ecosystem. So In order to do all of those things, we're going to need platform interoperability, and some of the capability, a number of the vendors and industry partners I've met with, I know are focused on ensuring that their platforms as they're built are able to be interoperable. We need to be able to better query in place with the relevant capabilities that in security that comes with that. And then there are different types of encryption capabilities that we're going to need to roll out that will allow for some of this capability. So I'm excited about where that's going.
So you're talking a little bit about looking at storage cost, platform interoperability. Earlier in the program, you said you're talking about leveraging industries, platforms, and data. So there's a lot of private sector engagement going on, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about how you see that advancing, working with the private sector to help meet some of the top mission needs across the board when it comes to development and use of OSINT technology.
Well, I mean, I'm excited, but I think we have a ways to go. What we've done so far this past year has been, I think, really important in that we've identified a couple of really great opportunities, both from a framework perspective of how we're going to approach this information going forward and how we're going to partner with industry, and then as well from more of a specific, who are the types of partners that can help best get us to those longer term solutions, or that information at a more efficient pace. And so one of the things that I would really encourage industry, those of you on listening to this, or maybe who might listen later, is we have really done a lot over the past, I would say, 6 months to roll out actual policies or strategies or frameworks that maybe on their own, in some cases, are not as specific as what you might want. But if you look at the CAI framework, that was incredibly specific and probably a pretty bureaucratic document that to many. But when you think about it from a design perspective, and if you're trying to help put together capabilities that you can then later offer to the government, one of the things that I think is going to be incredibly important for us long term, not just within the OSINT community, but across the board, is having access to commercial information that already takes into account the privacy rights and concerns that people, that we are going to, and we've already, adopted within the IC. We are being much more thoughtful about employing best practices and actual policies that are ensuring certain types of data are not easily accessible or accessible at all. And we are also employing a layered approach to how that information or the broader CAI information space is acquired and accessed. And that involves sensitivity analysis, it involves legal analysis, it involves mission need analysis, and overall leadership approval. Those types of general concepts are not that hard to think about when you're putting together, certain platforms and how to adopt those themes in your build of the platforms. And so I think it would behoove many of you to think about how to adopt many, those practices in a way that you can then demonstrate when you're trying to show the community that, hey, you've got a great platform to offer.
Okay. Hey, we got a lot of audience questions, so let me get some of these in here. The first one I have is from Marty Grisky with Carasoft. And Marty asked, what is the biggest problem facing teams currently using OSINT today, and what would help close that gap?
Marty, I think there's a couple of things. One, we have right now within the IC over the last couple of years, we have engaged in 18 different approaches to how we're doing certain types of collection and maybe how we are analyzing the information that, or not analyzing the information that we're collecting. And you know, I would say over the last year, we've done a huge amount of work to lay the foundation to improve that, but we've got a ways to go. And so something that we're focused on is what are the platforms and what are the training approaches to training that will best position our collectors and our analysts to analyze the information they have access to in a more rapid way and in a more, you know, through common templates and standards, and then deliver that insight to decision makers much more effectively and efficiently. I think whenever you think about improving an enterprise-wide need, it's not the easiest thing to do, but one easy place to start for us that we can focus on is establishing common standards in tradecraft. And I think from an industry perspective, one thing that you can help with is better thinking through how something that might work for one organization is going to work for multiple organizations when it comes to either the platform or the method of collection or the type of data that you're talking about.
Thanks for that. Hey, another one is from Michael Groen. And Mike asked, when will we team OSINT with large language models to create broadly accessible value instead of more individual analyst-centric value?
Can you repeat that question, John?
Yeah, pairing OSINT with large language models, bringing large language models in to help us with the OSINT challenge to create broadly accessible value. When do you see that starting to mature?
I mean, we're already working through that right now. I think I'm equally interested in how we're going to leverage smaller models that maybe you know, operate more easily on the edge, and then partnering or marrying up those capabilities. But you know, to your question, I think, you know, we are already doing a lot of work to leverage, you know, large language models and the generative AI capability that comes with, and you know, and generative AI capabilities to deliver, you know, some initial insight. It is not where it needs to be, but we know that. We are also, I think, and CIA has done a fantastic job of developing certain things here, but we are well on our way to delivering, I think, enterprise-wide capabilities there. It's just going to take a little bit of time to build out and scale that. But where it's going is it's going to allow us to operate and push out information, or let's say build an architecture that allows not just the analysts in DC to deliver insight to policymakers, but we're going to be able to deliver more capabilities on the edge as well as we further refine our knowledge base. Great.
Let me follow that up with a question that gets to generative AI issue from Larry Berger from Cyber Huntsville organization down in Alabama. And Larry asked, as OSINT uses generative AI more, how will we assure that the results are trusted and not able to be manipulated?
Well, this is one of those things where I think it's a framing issue. Mm-hmm. People forget that humans are you know, can be manipulated as well, and so we want to be scared away from technology that potentially offers greater efficiency and allows us to improve our overall accuracy on a more consistent and reoccurring basis, because it might it might infrequently, but occasionally offer less than accurate insight. And I think that's where marrying it up with the human element is so critical. And we are absolutely not thinking about or pursuing an approach that replaces our collectors or our analysts with generative AI, but we are absolutely thinking about how we best marry up those two in a way that both helps improve our prompt engineering and prompt approaches on the front end to how we are assessing and refining the answers that, or the output that comes after using it. And I think it's going to allow us to get to a much more consistent gain in that space when it comes to efficiency. It's going to allow us to address questions faster. And it will, in aggregate, improve, I think, our confidence in the answers that we're providing. But it's going to be an iterative process that, I think everybody's eyes wide open to. And, we should be interested in and excited about that, not scared about it.
Yeah, I'll just comment, I think the intelligence community has always dealt with denial and deception issues, and this is just a new page in that book.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a great question here from Dee Dee Rapp that's sort of along the same line, and it says, how do you foresee yourself interacting with one of your colleagues there at ODNI, the new Chief AI Officer, once that effort is up and fully operational?
Actually, I talked to John quite a bit, John Beeler and many others in that space. I learn a lot from him and his team. And frankly, I think that that group is doing, not just that group, but the group around the IC of AI officers is really thinking thoughtfully about how to leverage this capability. But one of the things that I've talked to John about and talked to others about is within the OSINT space, or within the IC, I think the OSINT space offers perhaps one of the best opportunities for the IC to adopt, incorporate, and leverage these technologies, as a first mover. And through that work, it will help refine our understanding of how best to leverage it at scale across all of the IC and all of the disciplines. And we're already helping to inform some of that. But there are a host of other challenges, as Didi, I know that you're aware of how to incorporate some of that technology into high side systems. It just brings with it a whole host of other issues. But the conversations that I've had with that group and with our ODNI Chief AI Officer have been along the lines of how can we best leverage this technology within the OSINT space to help inform broader IC efforts? How can what we're doing in our space serve as lessons learned? And then, frankly, what can we do in our space that nobody else can do?
Hey, here's a question we asked a little bit. It's from our friend I talked about before the show with you, Ron Marks, who's over at George Mason right now in the JAR School, and he talks about funding for some of the OSINT programs. He asked, how are these OSINT efforts being financed, and is the DNI overseeing a process of, how they're executed across the NIP?
Yeah, I have to give a lot of credit to my boss, the DNI on this. She has been interested in open source even before she came, back into government service. If you look at some of the products that she was a part of before that were produced before she came back in, clearly open source was touched on as hugely critical. And then when she came back in, she has done a lot to work with her IC partners and find additional resources to help serve the OSINT community. But beyond her, one of the areas that we really have to focus on is how do we get, frankly, to a place where the vast majority of the IC agencies are tagging a certain amount of resources as open source resources, open source intelligence work. We've moved away from a lot of that, frankly, from where we even were in 2010. And I personally think it led to a bit of a lost decade of work in the open source community. And so we need to do now a much more consistent and thorough job of not just allocating resources to open source missions, but actually tagging those dollars to OSINT in the budget. And what that will allow us to do is be much more deliberate about how we're using this, how we're using those and how we're burden sharing across the IC. Because right now what's happening is we've gotten to a place over that lost decade where only 3 or 4 agencies were even tagging dollars. That's not okay. And it ultimately leads to an incredible amount of burden only being shared by 1 or 2 places. And that's not fair to them, but it also leads to an atrophy of skills and capabilities and common standards across the board. We need to recover from that and get us back into a much better place.
Okay. Hey, the next question is from Morgan Carlston with Booz Allen. And the question is, how do you see public-private partnerships in the OSINT industry developing over the next 5 years? So kind of get out your crystal ball, look ahead 5 years. Where do you see the government, industry, public-private partnerships in the future?
I think this is an incredibly exciting space for the open source community because we should be able to sit side by side with our private sector partners. We should be able to have a distributed workforce that's not just serving as a liaison, but is actually doing mission work in a way that is, if not integrated, certainly side by side with industry partners. And so, we are definitely focused on innovating in this space. We are focused on, not just where those, the engineering side of the house, but and the platform development, but the data itself and how we might sit side by side with or virtually with industry partners in this space. But we're really trying to go beyond just that broad term of public-private partnership that gets used quite a bit, but then you really don't see much behind that. And we're really trying to adopt a much more assertive posture, at least over the long term when it comes to OSINT and working closely with our partners.
Okay. Hey, I think we have time for one last question, and well, let me read it to you. It says, it's in the theme of working with our foreign partners, and it looks at the NATO summit that we just had here in Washington last week. And the question is, were there any major takeaways or discussion about OSINT during the NATO summit in Washington? And can you tell us about that? Working with our partners, sharing this information, collaborating. What are we doing with our partners like NATO and others in this space?
So, I was recently over there, and met with NATO partners, obviously before the most recent summit last week, and also, had a lot of conversations with leadership and with those on the those at the working level and everyone in between. And what is a common theme that comes across is the opportunity that they have to really lean forward in the open source space. It's no longer viewed as something that is a nice to have, but it is really viewed as kind of the key basis through which they're going to be able to share information across the partnership, across the entire NATO architecture. And I think some of the work that they're doing from a tradecraft perspective that I've personally been a part of and seen is some of the leading edge work, frankly, that I would like to see the IC adopt a little bit more. So there's clearly some opportunity to share back and forth lessons learned when it comes to how they're leveraging open source information. But when it comes to large partnerships like NATO and large organizations like NATO, it's really difficult to share sensitive information, that is classified in a highly classified manner. I think we have done a fantastic job of that over the last couple of years through a lot of the leadership the DNI and others have shown. I think it's hard to scale that work, though. And one area where we can scale much more easily is leveraging open source platforms and tools and data to deliver insights that each NATO partner can share much more rapidly. And I think that can apply not just to NATO, but to our partners in the Indo-PACOM area as well.
Great. Hey, well, we're out of time. We've covered a lot of ground this morning. Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
No, I just, listen, I appreciate this opportunity and this time with everybody. We just ask for your support, not just within our community, but with Congress and elsewhere. We are aggressively working to deliver not just better collection and better partnerships with the IC and with industry, but also better product to decision makers and our warfighter partners. And it can only work if we've got great information and great partnership and the resources to make it happen. And so we're looking to make some hard decisions internally, but we also need some support from others outside.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us this morning and for your insights. And thank you again to Janes for sponsoring this 3-part series on OSINT. For everyone who joined us online today, thanks for taking time to be with us. And when the webinar ends, there's a short survey, a couple of questions. Please take a few moments to complete it. Let us know how we did. Looking ahead, on Tuesday, July 30th, we're going to have a leadership dinner honoring the new NSA Director, General Hawk. We expect nearly 300 IC and national security leaders to be on hand for this event, and General Hawk will share some of his top priorities, including election security, cybercom 2.0, threats to critical infrastructure, and more. We hope to see you there. Also, next month in August, we will be beating the heat with a series of virtual programs. On August the 14th, we'll be talking with the new director of DCSA, David Cattler, to hear about his plans and priorities for that organization. And on Tuesday, August the 20th, we're going to have a program called Beyond the Big Six, the pivotal role of lesser known IC agencies. I'm excited for this discussion. It's going to be led by INSA Senior Advisor Sue Gordon, and she's going to be talking to the intelligence leads, the heads of the intelligence activities in Treasury, State, Energy, and the Department of Homeland Security. You won't want to miss it. And then towards the end of the month, we'll have on August the 22nd a discussion with the IC's Chief Information Officer, Adele Merritt, to find out about what's going on with her and the IC's new information technology roadmap. You can learn more about all these events on our website, insaonline.org. This concludes our morning's program. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.